Bocchi the Rock does feel like a very special anime in the sense that it feels like it was catered to me and me only, because I'm the only human being who is alive and sometimes has problems talking to people. In January of last year, the anime studio Cloverworks released the greatest piece of media ever to grace this planet upon us, and a measly year later they managed to almost do that very same thing again with Bocchi the Rock, a slice-of-life anime starring Hitori Goto, a girl so introverted and socially anxious I'm pretty sure she's afraid of sunlight, who also has a passion for playing the guitar. And she's really good at it too. She wants to use these guitar playing skills of hers to gather together a band and perform with them to achieve popularity among her peers and beyond. But nothing's really happened so far due to the previously mentioned introvertedness and social anxiety. One day she decides to take the guitar her dad's been lending her for the longest time to school in hopes that somebody'll start up a conversation with her because of it, since God knows she can't do that herself. Surprisingly enough, this doesn't work and nobody comes to talk to her in school. But when she's outside sitting at a local park essentially sulking, by chance a girl named Nijika appears, sees Goto's guitar and starts begging her to be the guitarist at her band's show later that day, since their original guitarist pulled a your dad and left without notice. Goto, not being able to say no, or really anything, gets dragged along to the first ever live event of Kessoku Band, more formally known as Zip Tie. When they get to the club they'll be performing at, we get introduced to the band's bassist, Ryo, and with this small but determined assembly, the three go out to play their first mini concert with Goto in a cardboard box due to not being able to play while seeing the crowd. They sucked, but they don't get completely let down by this.
こうして後藤一人は灰となり、もう二度とギターを持つことはなかったのでした。
Okay, everyone except Goto don't get completely let down by this and start already planning on how to get better as a band for their next show. And in this moment, Goto realizes that she's just gotten miraculously dragged into the exact place she always wanted to be in. A band. Ryo comes up with the nickname Bocchi for Goto, which she immediately adopts, officially starting the journey of Bocchi the Rock. This premise is a fairly simple one. A socially anxious person getting dragged along to join a band to live out their dreams of becoming a musician. But what makes this show special is how unbelievably relatable Bocchi is. Obviously, most people on the planet who've seen this show have said that exact same thing, and that's because everybody here is about as much of a loser as Bocchi. That's right, I'm talking about you, you pathetic little slug. But her character's been fleshed out to include a lot of details that even non-socially anxious people can relate to, and people with anxiety can hurt together over. Waiting minutes upon minutes to do something anxiety-inducing even if it's really simple. Ow. Getting very easily ego boosted by praise. Ow. Not being able to make a decision that would only do good for you because making decisions in general is scary. Ow. Being unable to start a conversation due to the possibility of it falling flat. And of course, the question that lingers at the back of every anxious person's head: what if? Cool, great, it's fantastic to see such accurate representation of anxiety in media. I really appreciate being called out. Bocchi's character just manages to capture these very specific feelings I feel like don't get explored that much when it comes to slice of life. And these feelings aren't even restricted to just social anxiety. Bocchi shows off feelings like how weird it is to have friends over for the first time if you haven't had any friends before, how nerve-wracking it can be to try to initiate anything in a group you don't feel like you belong to yet, the generally surreal feeling that there are people outside of your family that were once strangers that now care about the fact that you exist? I'm showing a very sad side of myself to the internet, aren't I? And obviously I have to mention the thing that happens the most in the series, the overly animated scenes of Bocchi sinking into the worlds inside her head. These scenes are played just for a laugh in the show, but still the concept of these episodes probably hit hard for some people as well. The dumbest things can make people spiral into loops of anxious thoughts, and whilst they usually look like this, it can feel like this at points too, and I can appreciate these strange yet common spirals being shown in an easier to understand way. All of these subtle and less subtle character traits create a character who most people can relate to on at least some level. Because everyone worries sometimes, everybody gets anxious, and everyone has problems in at least some aspect of social interaction. And if you're saying you don't, you're lying to me and yourself. This relatability makes seeing Bocchi grow into a better person that much much more fun to witness. Also, she makes music and YouTube videos, which makes her character hit that much harder for me personally. And obviously, on top of Bocchi, we've got these side characters, who are all great too. You don't exist. There's the reasonable one, aka the one I don't care much for. There's the funny one, the scarily extroverted one, who I'll get to in a second, and of course, the best one, on top of a few side characters with like 3 lines each. The overly extroverted girl, Kita, doesn't appear in the band immediately. Instead, Bocchi, by another set of miraculous circumstances, manages to get Kita to try out for the band, only to find out her true identity as the runaway guitarist. Turns out, she can't actually play the guitar, and felt too embarrassed to do anything but leave. But now she cannot escape, and due to feeling so guilty, gets Bocchi to teach her guitar so she can be a proper part of the band. And with the whole band gathered, they can start practicing properly and the show can also start properly. From this point onward, we just follow their adventures as they get to know each other and practice their original songs to be played in front of bigger and bigger crowds. And immediately, I must say that these characters complement each other really well. To compensate for Bocchi's introvertedness, there's Kita, bringing in so much outgoing energy, I'm sure she'd go into cardiac arrest if she couldn't talk to anyone during a given day. Nichika is the one keeping everything and everyone together by organizing every band meeting, making the band's general existence possible, and balancing out the case studies in the two opposites of human interaction. They all make for a very balanced group that's really fun to just watch do things together, whether it be band practice or them simply having fun doing whatever. And also, Rio's there, who doesn't add all that much to anything, but I don't mind since she's funny. Speaking of funny, this show is funny. I've exclaimed in videos before how I don't think anime is particularly funny, but Bocchi actually had me actively exhaling out of my nose at multiple points. A ton of jokes are based around sudden changes in art style, by having the animators give up on sections, replacing Bocchi with my first Project.Blender file, or by just changing to IRL footage. And every joke hits, which I didn't expect at all. Also, now that we're on the topic of art styles, Bocchi's got a real good one. I'm not really bringing it with the transitions today, sorry. Some of the shots look kinda meh like in every show, but otherwise it's got a very cozy, occasionally bubbly look to it that makes the show very comfortable to watch, on top of the sudden style changes to keep you on your toes simultaneously. And as for the music, it's pretty good. To be honest, I was expecting a few more bangers in the general OST because it is a show about music and bands, but found myself thinking it was just decent. However, the OP, EDs, and all the songs the various bands played were all bangers, and I think made up for the rest of the mostly mid OST. Also, during the section where Ziptie is playing their song for the first time in front of an audience as a full group, it was genuinely painful seeing how accurately they displayed the playing of a nervous band, with the slightly out of breath singing, the tempo switching drums, and confused bass. As a person who has played at a few live school events before with people who weren't accustomed to playing live, nervous playing sounds exactly like how they portrayed it in the show, and I for one applaud but also hate the creators of the show for being so accurate. It hurt my soul, but in a good way. But good and varied visuals mixed in with great music and a decent OST wouldn't really mean much if the show itself wasn't very good. Yet thankfully there's a lot to love about Bocchi aside from the relatable aspect. And to drive home this point, I'd like to talk about some of my favorite scenes of the show, which all show off the character growth of Bocchi through the means of the band's various performances. At the beginning of the band's assembly, Bocchi was in it mostly to fulfill her wish to become more popular, but as she grew closer to the members, she started to question her motives for playing with them. And during an audition to get to play at their very first venue, she finally realizes that she's doing this for her own reasons, yes, but also because goddammit she has friends who care about her now, and she doesn't want it all to leave her world just yet, leading to a stellar performance and a phenomenal, emotionally charged song played by the band that all made for an absolutely beautiful scene. And that was just the first time they played. During their second time playing, they have an audience instead of just the manager of the club watching, and their first song doesn't go as well as they planned, discouraging them all. But Bocchi thinks the band has worked too hard and they've come too far to let it all fail now, so kicks it into overdrive during the second song, saving the show and showing how Bocchi's grown from being the first to butt out of a situation to someone who'll fight for what she wants. She's willing to fight for her friends, this band, and her future. It's a very similar scene to to their first performance, but shows a different, equally powerful side of Bocchi. And during their last show at the school festival, after weeks of practice, everything is going amazingly, and Bocchi even manages to save her own solo from a detuned guitar by bottlenecking it at the very last second. She's finally gained some level of popularity in her school, even if it's just people knowing her as that one girl who played guitar well one time. She's not afraid to face the crowd head on, and in general shows how much she's grown during her time with the band. She gets put on the spot as the crowd wants her to say something, and with the overconfidence of someone who's never gotten praised by a mass of people, she jumps into the crowd ready to crowd surf, only to... This is another thing I really liked about Bocchi. No, not the hurting of teenagers. The fact that Bocchi very much has the same personality she had at the beginning of the show. She still has a hard time talking to people and is fairly unappeased by the idea of everything social, and it shows how change doesn't happen immediately. You can get all the things you think you need to change yourself into the version you want to be, but even then it won't happen in an instant. Bettering yourself takes a long ass time and won't be visible to an outsider for a good while if the thing you want to change is rooted deep within you. Bocchi shows this by having her character change in slight ways. She initiates an activity during the last few episodes, compared to their complete denying of such thoughts in previous episodes. She can face a crowd now, compared to the box she had to be in during her first performance. She says her opinion on things like 10% more at the end of the season compared to the beginning, and though this change might not seem large on the outside, it's been huge for Bocchi. It's a very simple message, but shown in a concrete yet subtle way. I like it. If she'd have changed into a completely different and confident person by the end of the show, it wouldn't have been nearly as good. So I'm very glad Bocchi stays as her awkward self until the very end, despite all of the changes in her life. But of course, life ain't like anime, and whilst I am mostly glad this is the case, it also means that for most people, Bocchi's situation seems like a dream to have, but a nightmare to get. And that's where the second thing I got out of the show comes in. People can appear in your life if you just let yourself into scenarios where people can invite themselves into it, or be invited into it. Obviously, this is horrendously easier said than done. I too have an extremely hard time following this advice, but going to places or showing off sides of yourself that you feel like are important to you might just land you somewhere where you can meet people similar to you. It's not gonna be as easy or miraculous as in Bocchi most likely, and will probably take a few tries before anything happens, but it still applies to real life. So go to that geeky event, go to that concert, take your guitar with you to school, go to the places you want to go to despite being anxious about it, because there will most likely be like-minded people there in a similar situation, looking for people with the same interests, no matter how strange that interest may seem. You know, just as long as it's not illegal. And someday, you might find yourself in the situation you dreamed of having years ago. Also, on a more light note, this show doesn't have any fan service despite there being some in the manga. Thank fuck. Look, I'm gonna be honest with you, I wasn't initially even gonna make a video on Bocchi after my first watch. But then I saw some clips appear in my YouTube feed and continued on to rewatch the show twice, during which I realized just how much I didn't want the adventures of these characters to end despite the satisfying ending. So to get rid of this longing feeling, I thought a video similar to my Dress Up Darling video was in order. And I believe I've now gushed enough and said my piece about this amazing show. So what on earth are you still doing here? Thanks for watching, go watch Bocchi, then go outside.